There's one powerful experience nearly everyone faces in their life, yet hardly anyone speaks about it openly. I'm talking about the dark night of the soul. I have gone through it myself at least a couple times, feeling utterly lost, questioning my identity, my purpose, and even my existence. I've also seen many clients struggle deeply with this inner crisis that swallows you up, really. And I've helped them successfully navigate through it. And so in this video, I'm going to show you exactly what this experience means, why it happens, and I will give you a safe roadmap to overcome it stronger than ever. Now, maybe you're watching this because you're in the middle of your own dark night. Perhaps you feel lost, you feel empty, or like everything you once believed in has crumbled. Or maybe you've emerged from such a period and you're trying to make sense of what happened. Now, wherever you are on this journey, I want you to know something important. You are not alone. And what you're experiencing, as painful as it may be, has profound meaning and is a natural part of being human. So who came up with the idea of a dark night of the soul? So the phrase comes from a 16th century poem by Spanish mystic and poet St. John of the Cross. He was imprisoned in Spain, where he was kept in a tiny cell about 6 feet by 10 feet or 6 square meters for 9 months. He was given minimal food and he was kept in really harsh conditions. And it was actually during this imprisonment that he began composing some of his most famous poetry, including parts of The Dark Night of the Soul. He used the phrase to describe a profound spiritual crisis, which is a period when someone feels completely abandoned by God, yet paradoxically, is actually drawing closer to divine union. Now, I'm not religious and I didn't suffer in the way St. John did, but I definitely went through at least 2 spiritual crises that almost broke me. After being in the closet for many years, I finally had my coming out in 2010 at age 26 with my first girlfriend, who I was deeply in love with, and I thought we were gonna get married and start a family together. But in 2012, after 2.5 years of living and traveling together, she broke up with me and it shattered my world into a million pieces. It wasn't just a breakup. It was the dissolution of my identity and life as I knew it at the time. The pain that I experienced led to my darkest nights and days, but eventually to my awakening. It was the initiation onto my individuation and self-healing journey that would last many, many years. Now, fast forward to 2019, 2020. I went through another big dark night of the soul after, yep, you guessed it, another breakup, which was followed by big, unexpected life changes that I just totally didn't see coming at all. Now, today, 5 years later, I'm living the best life, better than I could have ever imagined. And I know for a fact that both of these periods of deep, deep darkness needed to happen for all of this to fall into place. And for this, I'm incredibly grateful. But as they say, you cannot connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking back. Okay, so let's talk about what a dark night of the soul really is. As mentioned, you don't need to be religious to experience a dark night of the soul. At its core, it is a profound human experience that transcends specific beliefs. It is a crisis of meaning, of identity, and purpose that can affect anyone. But unlike ordinary sadness or depression, and though they may share symptoms, the dark night has a transformative quality. It's not just about feeling bad. It's about being fundamentally changed by the experience in this period in your life. Think of it as a spiritual or existential crisis where the old you is dying so a new you can be born. It's like a death rebirth process. It's like the cocoon phase of human transformation, which is necessary but incredibly uncomfortable. Now, speaking of cocoon, did you know when a caterpillar descends into its cocoon, it doesn't transform from caterpillar to a butterfly just like that. It actually digests itself and becomes a kind of gooey-like material. Like it literally dissolves and dies before transforming into a butterfly. Now, I find that a pretty appropriate archetypical metaphor for what we experience on a spiritual level during a dark night of the soul. Our identity and world, they disintegrate. And we're like becoming like goo. And somehow, out of this goo, the phoenix eventually rises and we come out as someone new. Now, we might not choose a dark night for ourselves. It really is given to us. It is our job to get close to it and to look for the gold in that it has to offer. Now, there's a quote I came across the other day, and it went like this: "The deeper your descent, the greater your ascent." Basically, the deeper you dive, the higher you will rise. And I feel like this is definitely true of dark nights of the soul. And damn, they can be so dark. But wow, do we come out as a new version of ourselves. So far, I can definitely tell you that my growth was exponential during those dark nights. And I truly believe that the darkness holds gifts that we could never find in the light. Now, a dark night of the soul usually always follows a series of stages. What triggers a dark night is often an event or realization that disrupts your existing worldview. Maybe it's the loss of a loved one, or it's the end of a significant relationship, as in my case. Maybe your career collapsed, or you faced a serious health challenge. Maybe you entered a midlife crisis, experienced trauma or burnout. Or maybe nothing obvious at all happened and you just have this crippling feeling that your life just doesn't fit anymore. Now, in the second stage, you realize that what worked before no longer works. And that familiar sources of meaning, they suddenly feel hollow. This is then followed by a painful period of disorientation as your beliefs and your identity begin to crumble. You feel increasingly disconnected from others, and often you just feel misunderstood. And here you really have no choice but to go deeper into yourself while you're experiencing these intense emotions like despair, like emptiness and meaninglessness. And this is typically the most painful phase where you may feel completely alone or abandoned. At some point, though, you get tired of fighting and you start surrendering to the process. Now, this is a crucial turning point. This is not giving up. It's rather accepting that this transformation is indeed happening and that fighting it only prolongs the suffering. And you then end up in this really lonely and empty place where nothing feels meaningful. And you're not who you used to be, but you're not yet who you're becoming. And then slowly, glimmers start breaking through the darkness, and you start sensing meaning in the suffering, and you're catching glimpses of what might lie beyond it. It's like your eyes are slowly adjusting, allowing you to see things you couldn't see before. And the final stage involves integrating the lessons and transformations of the dark night. You begin piecing together a new way of being that feels more authentic than your old life ever did. Now, the whole journey rarely happens just once. Most of us go through versions of this cycle throughout our lives, each time emerging with a bit more wisdom and compassion. And it's less about finding all the answers and more about getting comfortable with the big questions and the mysteries of being human. And many people are really scared of entering their darkness because they worry they may never escape it. But the true danger is actually in avoiding it, because healing only happens when we fully experience grief and transformation. The dark night of the soul is a truly sacred time, not something to be feared. And you might be wondering how to tell if you're actually in a dark night of the soul rather than just going through a rough patch. Now, while everyone's journey looks different, there are some telltale signs worth noting. So, you might find yourself feeling strangely disconnected from activities, relationships, things that used to light you up. Like, it's just like the color has drained out of things that once felt really meaningful. And there's often this pervasive emptiness that sits at your core, along with this relentless questioning of beliefs that you previously took for granted. Also, day-to-day life can just start to feel mechanical, like you're just going through the motions without really being present. And even in a room full of people who care about you, you might feel profoundly alone and misunderstood. And then there might be this bone-deep exhaustion that doesn't go away no matter how much you rest. It's not physical tiredness, but something deeper. Also, your emotional foundation might feel really shaky, and you might have periods of psychological instability that can be really unsettling. So if several of these experiences resonate with you, you might be indeed navigating your own dark night. And knowing that can actually be the first step toward finding your way through it. Now, what makes the dark night particularly challenging is that the usual solutions don't work anymore. No amount of positive thinking, of self-help strategies, or distractions provide lasting relief. And the thing is, this isn't a problem to be solved. The dark night of the soul is a process to be experienced. And if you're currently in your own dark night, there are some approaches that may help and that help me on my own journey into the darkness and eventually coming out of it again. Now, first, you gotta stop resisting. You gotta let go of the idea that life is supposed to feel good all the time. This was really hard for me back then. So don't try to fix yourself quickly or rush the process. Don't try to figure it all out immediately. It will take as long as it takes. So allow yourself to really feel everything, to surrender control and trust the deeper unfolding. Because think about it, you wouldn't interfere with the natural process of a birth. So stop resisting your dark night. We are not here to solve and get rid of the dark night, but we're here to be enriched by it. Now, my second advice is that you seek inner connection rather than outer escape. This is a time for journaling, for meditation, and any other practices that help you go inwards rather than outwards. Third is to learn how to regulate yourself to create more capacity. The more you take care of your nervous system by doing daily balancing breath work, somatic practices, and just generally de-stressing your life, the more resilience you will have to actually move through the dark night. Another thing I recommend is that while you're in your dark night, this is the time to do some really deep shadow work. A great way is to dive into parts work like internal family systems, or maybe do some expressive writing based on James Pennebaker's approach. And I also really recommend exploring depth psychology and Jungian authors like James Hollis, James Hillman, Robert Johnson, Conni, Joseph Campbell, or Marie-Louise von Franz. You will find a lot of answers just by diving into Jungian psychology, and that was something that really helped me on my journey as well. Advice number 5 is to allow yourself to grieve. Grieve the loss of past illusions, grieve the emptiness, grieve your past life that just is no more. Modern psychology often pathologizes natural emotional pain instead of allowing it to serve its healing purpose. So grief is so important to feel during a dark night. And often you might also hit upon some deep buried anger and just feel that also. I highly recommend you get really comfortable with your emotions and being comfortable to work through them, to express them and properly process them. Another recommendation is to create art. write songs, poems, or stories, make videos, paint or draw. Many artists created their best work out of their darkest nights. I actually did too back then. My darkest periods were often my most creative. And lastly, get support. You do not need to walk through the darkness alone. Work with a therapist or a coach, someone who's trained in depth psychology and body-based somatic psychology. And to get you going right away, here are 2 books I recommend that you read. Number 1 is by Thomas Moore. It's called Dark Nights of the Soul. And number 2 is by Pema Chodron. It's called When Things Fall Apart. For me, back then, actually, my first personal development, spiritual book was A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle. It was an absolute game changer. And maybe it is for you as well. I don't know, but I would get started with the first 2. Now, above all, please remember this. The dark night is not endless, even when it feels that way. It might not have a timeline. It can take months, it can take years, but it will end. And so here's where we need to consider something counterintuitive. What if the dark night isn't something going wrong, but something going right? Throughout history and across cultures, darkness has been recognized as a necessary phase of growth. Think about how seeds must be buried in dark soil before they can sprout, and how caterpillars, as mentioned before, must dissolve completely in the darkness of the cocoon before becoming butterflies. The dark night, it serves several crucial purposes. It gives us access to soul-level growth that simply isn't available through more comfortable experiences. My biggest pain has been my greatest change activator, which has been awesome for all areas of life. Because of my dark nights, I started meditation, I started breath work, I learned about nonviolent communication, I started healing my traumas. And none of this would have happened if I had just been cruising through life. I've learned so much about myself, so much about psychology, which has led to me doing the work that I do today. The dark night also helps us move beyond simplistic ideas of happiness towards a more meaningful engagement with the fullness of human experience. As Carl Jung once said, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. And people will do anything, no matter how absurd, in order to avoid facing their own souls. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. I love that quote, and I love Carl Jung. The dark night is painful precisely because it's transformative. We learn more about the depths of our souls from periods of pain than from times of happiness and comfort. So what happens when we emerge from a dark night? Well, a lot. It's like a whole new life opens up. You almost don't recognize the person you were before, the life you were living before you were pulled under. When you come through a dark night of the soul, you start seeing life in this whole new way that goes way beyond just chasing good feelings and avoiding bad ones. You find meaning that transcends both pleasure and pain. And the process builds this incredible depth in you, like your heart becomes more spacious. You're able to hold both intense suffering and genuine joy without being overwhelmed by either. And it's funny how often people discover their true calling or purpose on the other side of this darkness, almost like the journey was necessary to strip away everything that wasn't authentic. And then there is this beautiful thing that happens in how you relate to others. Like you develop this capacity to simply be present with someone who's suffering without needing to fix them, without judging them, or without rushing them through it with, spiritual platitudes. That was me a long time ago. You can actually just sit in the darkness with them because you've been there yourself, and you know that sometimes that quiet presence is exactly what healing requires. The dark night, it changes us because it has to. We cannot walk through that level of questioning and disillusionment and rebirth and remain the same person. The changes, they may be subtle, they may be dramatic, but they are real and they're lasting. Just as forests regrow after fires with new diversity and strength, we too can emerge from our dark nights with qualities that we never knew we possessed. And if you take nothing else from this video, please remember this. The dark night of the soul is not a punishment or a sign that something is wrong with you. It's a profound, if yes, painful invitation to transformation. You may not have chosen this journey, but you can choose how you walk it. And by embracing it rather than fighting it, you may discover dimensions of yourself and of life that you never knew existed. And now, if you've experienced your own dark night and you have insights to share, please leave them in the comments. I'd love to read them. And if you want to learn about a super powerful self-therapy modality that will help you get through the dark night, then check out this video. Now, thank you for joining me today. Until next time, be gentle with yourself, especially in the darkness. Peace.